Flight attendants froze as Captain Wade Collins stormed into first class, pointing at Jamal Washington. "You need to give up that seat now." The 17-year-old clutched his chess trophy tighter. "I have a valid ticket, sir." As the pilot threatened arrest, passengers raised phones to record. Nobody knew the quiet teen's mother owned the entire airport, and the airline. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how this high-flying confrontation transforms into a powerful lesson about standing your ground. Trust me, the chess prodigy's next move will leave you speechless. Jamal Washington's fingers traced the contours of his newly acquired National Chess Championship trophy as he settled into seat 2A. The cool metal reminded him of the journey that brought him here, not just to this first-class cabin, but to becoming the youngest national chess champion in 30 years. Earlier that day, Jamal had faced Grandmaster Petrov in a match that chess commentators would analyze for years. The Russian's experience versus the American teen's innovative approach had created a symphony of strategic brilliance. When Jamal executed his queen sacrifice in move 37, leading to checkmate 3 moves later, the auditorium had erupted in applause. "Your mind operates differently," his coach Terence had told him afterward. "You see patterns others can't even imagine." That pattern recognition had earned Jamal his scholarship to Westwood Academy 3 years ago, a prestigious private school where wealth and tradition permeated the limestone walls. Jamal often felt the weight of being one of only 7 black students in the entire high school. "Mr. Washington, are you sure you wouldn't be more comfortable taking AP statistics instead?" Mrs. Harrington had suggested during his freshman year course selection, despite his perfect math placement scores. Advanced theoretical mathematics is quite rigorous. Jamal had simply shown her his middle school math competition results, 6 first-place trophies in national competitions. She'd pursed her lips and signed the form. His English teacher, Mr. Keller, regularly expressed surprise at Jamal's vocabulary and writing skills, often asking in front of the class, "Where did you learn to write like this?" as if exceptional academic achievement required additional explanation when it came from a black student. These microaggressions had become background noise in Jamal's life. His mother, Zora Washington, had prepared him for this reality from an early age. Zora Washington was a legend in tech circles, a brilliant software architect who had developed a revolutionary logistics management system that transformed global shipping and air travel. ZW Technologies had grown from her dorm room project at MIT into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that powered nearly 70% of the world's major transportation systems. Yet despite her vast wealth, Forbes estimated her net worth at $8.2 billion, Zora raised Jamal in a modest 4-bedroom home in a diverse neighborhood. They drove practical cars. Jamal attended public school until Westwood's scholarship offer. Zora wanted her son to value intelligence and character over material displays. "Money can insulate you from some hardships," she often told him, "but it can't protect you from being black in America. Build your strength from within." Jamal had insisted on taking a commercial flight home rather than his mother's private jet after the championship. "I need some quiet time to decompress," he told her on the phone. "Just me and regular people." Regular people can be complicated, Zora had warned. Especially when they see a young black man in first class. Jamal had laughed. "Mom, it's 2025. Not everything is about race. Call me when you land," she'd replied, her tone carrying 20 years of experience navigating predominantly white industries as a black woman. Jamal had brushed off her concern. He believed that excellence transcended prejudice, that his achievements spoke for themselves. His chess success created a meritocracy where only his moves mattered, not his skin color. As he settled into his first-class seat, reviewing the championship match on his tablet, Jamal felt the satisfaction of proving himself on his own terms. The trophy beside him represented something beyond victory, it represented belonging in spaces where few people looked like him. He didn't notice the subtle double takes from flight attendants as they passed, or the way the businessman across the aisle clutched his bag a little tighter when Jamal reached into the overhead compartment. Years of such experiences had trained him to focus elsewhere. Jamal was lost in the beautiful complexity of the Queen's sacrifice that had clinched his victory when Captain Wade Collins first received word of a seating issue in first class. The chess prodigy had no idea that his presence had already triggered a series of assumptions that would soon collide with his hard-earned reality. "Your boarding pass, sir." The gate attendant, Brenda, had examined Jamal's ticket longer than necessary, glancing between the document and his face 3 times before reluctantly waving him through. As Jamal made his way down the jet bridge, he adjusted his Westwood Academy blazer, a habit before chess matches that had become a personal ritual. The first-class cabin welcomed him with its familiar aroma of leather and subtle perfume. Flight attendant Nicole Bailey performed a subtle double-take before plastering on a professional smile. "Window or aisle preference, sir?" she asked, despite his clearly marked seat assignment. "I'm in 2A, Jamal replied, pointing to his boarding pass. "The window is fine." Nicole nodded stiffly. "Of course. Can I see your boarding pass again?" Jamal handed it over, noting how she scrutinized it before returning it with a tight smile. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Washington." As other passengers boarded, Jamal withdrew his tablet to review his championship match. The businessman seated across from him, Brooks Henderson according to the luggage tag, clutched his designer briefcase closer when Jamal reached into his backpack for headphones. 30,000 feet above Tennessee, Jamal was deep in chess analysis when the first ripple of trouble reached the cockpit. Captain Wade Collins was having a terrible month. At 53, his 27-year career at Skyline Airlines had plateaued. The son of former airline executive Donald Collins, Wade had expected to be chief of operations by now, not still flying commercial routes. His father's connections had secured his position after a mediocre training performance, but couldn't accelerate his advancement beyond his capabilities. "Captain, we have a VIP request for Seat 2A, First Officer Sarah Chen reported, reading from her tablet. "Apparently someone important needs that specific seat on this flight." Collins removed his reading glasses with irritation. "Why wasn't this handled before boarding? Who is it?" "Message just came through. Doesn't specify who, just says, executive priority." Collins grumbled, thinking of the airline's recent financial troubles. His own investments had tanked with the airline's stock, and his second divorce was bleeding him dry. Executive priorities meant someone important to the airline's bottom line. "I'll handle it," Collins decided, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Must be Lawrence Frost or one of those board members. They're flying in for the quarterly meeting." First Officer Chen frowned. "Shouldn't we have the chief attendant handle passenger issues, Captain?" Collins was already standing. "I need to stretch my legs anyway. Maintain cruising altitude." As Collins made his way through the aircraft, his mind constructed a narrative. Some entitled kid had probably used points to upgrade, taking a seat needed by a true VIP. In his experience, young people never truly earned their privileges. What Collins saw when he entered first class confirmed his assumption: a young black man in seat 2A, headphones on, some kind of trophy beside him. Obviously not the usual first-class demographic in Collins' mind. "Excuse me," Collins said sharply, towering over Jamal's seat. When the young man didn't immediately respond, engrossed in his tablet, Collins' irritation spiked. He tapped Jamal's shoulder roughly. Jamal removed his headphones, looking up with surprise. "Yes. There's been a mistake with the seating assignments," Collins announced loudly. "I need you to relocate to coach." Jamal blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, what?" "I booked this seat months ago. We have a VIP who requires this specific seat," Collins continued, holding out his hand. "I'll need your boarding pass." Jamal hesitated, then produced his ticket. "I don't understand. I checked in online yesterday and confirmed at the gate." Collins barely glanced at the boarding pass. "Yes, well, priorities change. We'll refund the difference in fare." "But I have a confirmed reservation," Jamal insisted calmly. And I specifically booked this seat for the extra legroom. I'm quite tall. The captain's jaw tightened. Look, son, this isn't a negotiation. We need this seat for an airline executive. Several passengers were now watching the exchange. Nicole hovered nearby, clearly uncomfortable. With all due respect, Captain, Jamal said, I paid for this seat and I'd like to stay in it. Perhaps the executive could take another available seat in first class. He gestured to seat 3F, which remained empty. Collins leaned closer, lowering his voice. Listen, I don't think you understand how this works. When I say move, you move. This isn't the place to make some kind of statement. Jamal's expression remained neutral, but his grip on the armrest tightened. I'm not making a statement, sir. I'm simply occupying the seat I purchased. The captain straightened, color rising in his face. I have the authority to have you removed from this flight if you're being uncooperative. Across the aisle, passenger Melissa Turner began recording with her phone. Others followed suit. Is he being kicked out of first class? Someone whispered loudly. I'm not being uncooperative, Jamal replied evenly. I'm asserting my right to the seat I legally purchased. Could you please explain the exact policy that allows you to remove me without cause? Collins' patience snapped. That's it. If you won't comply voluntarily, I'll have the air marshal escort you to coach or off the plane entirely. Flight attendant Nicole finally stepped forward. Captain Collins, perhaps we should. Stay out of this, Collins snapped. Turning back to Jamal, he raised his voice. Last chance. Grab your things and move to seat 28B, or you're getting a personal escort from air marshals. The cabin had gone silent. Every eye was on Jamal, who sat perfectly still, his expression betraying nothing of the calculations running through his mind. I respectfully decline to move, Jamal stated clearly. And I'd like to speak to your supervisor. Collins' face darkened. I am the supervisor on this aircraft. My plane, my rules. He reached for his radio. I'm calling security. As phones continued recording, the confrontation had already escaped the confines of Flight 2187, streaming across social media platforms and racing toward the executive offices of ZW Technologies, where Zora Washington was about to receive an alert that would change everything. Zora Washington's corner office on the 48th floor of the ZW Technologies headquarters offered a panoramic view of Hamilton International Airport. From this height, the aircraft resembled toys, and the people mere specks moving with algorithmic precision, a system she had helped perfect with her logistics software. Ms. Washington. Her assistant Aiden knocked softly before entering. You asked to be notified of any unusual activity involving Jamal. Zora looked up from her holographic display, where complex shipping routes pulsed in vibrant colors. What's happened? Aiden placed a tablet in front of her. On screen was a social media feed showing a video already accumulating thousands of views. The caption read, Pilot trying to force black teen out of first class seat. #Skyline Airlines #discrimination. Zora's fingers tensed around her stylus as she recognized her son in the thumbnail. With one tap, the video expanded, and Captain Collins' voice filled her office. This isn't the place to make some kind of statement. Then Jamal's measured response, I'm not making a statement, sir. I'm simply occupying the seat I purchased. Zora watched the entire exchange, her expression impassive even as her mind calculated ramifications with the same precision that had built her empire. How many views? She asked when the video ended. Over 30,000 in 7 minutes, Aiden replied. It's going viral. 3 news networks have already reached out for comment. Zora nodded once. Call the board. Emergency meeting in 20 minutes. As Aiden departed, Zora swiveled her chair toward the window, gazing at Hamilton International's sprawling terminals. The airport named after her grandfather, a Tuskegee airman who had never been allowed to fly commercial planes despite his decorated military service. Zora had grown up hearing his stories. "They let me defend this country in the skies," he would tell her, "but wouldn't let me buy a ticket to fly in them after the war." Those stories had fueled her education, pushing her from the housing projects of East St. Louis to MIT on full scholarship. While other tech entrepreneurs chased social media and entertainment platforms, Zora had focused on transportation infrastructure, the literal and metaphorical pathways that connected humanity. When Hamilton International faced bankruptcy 5 years ago, Zora had purchased it through a series of holding companies, keeping her ownership private. 2 years later, when Skyline Airlines teetered on the edge of collapse during the pandemic, she'd acquired a controlling interest through similar means. The transportation industry had no idea that the most critical nodes in their network were now owned by the granddaughter of a man they had once barred from entry. Zora pressed a button on her desk. "Keisha, pull all the files on Captain Wade Collins. Employment history, performance reviews, complaint records. Everything." Right away, her chief of staff responded. Zora tapped another button. "Aaron, I need Skyline's manifest for Flight 2187. Specifically, I want to know what VIP supposedly requested Seat 2A. While waiting for this information, Zora watched the video again. Her son's composure filled her with pride. He was handling the situation with dignity that belied his 17 years. Yet the familiar knot of fear tightened in her stomach, the unique terror black parents feel when their children face racial hostility. The board members assembled virtually within 15 minutes, an unprecedented response time that reflected both Zora's influence and the potential crisis unfolding. "The situation is still developing," Zora informed them, her voice measured. "I'm gathering facts before determining our response. Shouldn't we issue an immediate statement?" asked Gregory Winters, head of public relations. "This is spreading fast." "No," Zora replied firmly. "Premature responses often miss the point. I want to understand exactly what happened and why." "It's clearly a misunderstanding," offered Thomas Bradford, a longtime board member. "Perhaps your son should simply move seats to defuse the situation." The slight narrowing of Zora's eyes was the only indication of her displeasure. "My son purchased that seat legally. He has every right to occupy it. The question isn't what my son should do, it's why an airline captain is threatening a paying customer without cause." Her tablet chimed with an incoming message from Aaron: "No VIP requested Seat 2A. No executive priority was logged for this flight." Zora's suspicion solidified. This wasn't about airline protocol, this was about a pilot who saw a young black man in first class and automatically assumed he didn't belong there. Keisha's report arrived next. Captain Wade Collins had 3 previous passenger complaints regarding unprofessional conduct, all filed by passengers of color. All had been dismissed due to insufficient evidence. "I've made my decision," Zora announced to the board. "We will not intervene directly at this moment. My son has the right to handle this situation himself first." "But Ms. Washington," protested Bradford, "this could escalate further." "Yes," Zora agreed. "It could become a valuable lesson about consequences." As the meeting concluded, Zora initiated a secure protocol that placed her security team on standby at Hamilton International. She wouldn't intervene yet, but she would be prepared to do so if necessary. Watching the aircraft on her monitor, now trending on multiple platforms, Zora recognized the painful parallel. 20 years ago, she had been removed from a first-class seat despite her valid ticket. That day, she had vowed to build a world where such indignities would face consequences. Today might be that day. Jamal Washington remained perfectly still in Seat 2A, his posture betraying none of the rapid calculations unfolding in his mind. Years of competitive chess had taught him to analyze situations many moves ahead, to see not just the immediate threat but the entire board's potential. "This isn't a chessboard asterisk," he reminded himself. "This is real life with real consequences." Yet he couldn't help applying the strategic principles: control the center, develop pieces methodically, recognize patterns, anticipate your opponent's strategy. Captain Collins had made an aggressive opening move, expecting immediate capitulation. Jamal's refusal to be captured had disrupted that expectation. "I've radioed for security," Collins announced loudly, his radio clutched in his white-knuckled grip. "They'll escort you to your new seat or off this aircraft entirely. Your choice." Jamal noticed at least 7 passengers openly recording now. The businessman across the aisle, who had earlier clutched his bag tighter when Jamal reached into his backpack, now looked uncomfortable for a different reason, witnessing discrimination he couldn't pretend wasn't happening. "Young man," came a voice from behind. Jamal turned to see an elderly white gentleman with silver hair rising from seat 3C. Franklin Adler, retired attorney. "May I approach?" Collins stepped between them. "Return to your seat, sir. This is an airline security matter." "Actually," Franklin replied calmly, "I believe this is a civil rights violation occurring in front of dozens of witnesses." He addressed Jamal directly. "I spent 30 years with the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. What the captain is doing constitutes discriminatory treatment under federal aviation regulations." Collins' face reddened further. "This has nothing to do with—" "Captain," Franklin interrupted, "I strongly suggest you verify whatever VIP request you're citing, because I suspect it doesn't exist. And if it doesn't, you've just created a textbook case of disparate treatment." Flight attendant Nicole Bailey stood frozen in the galley, her professional training at war with her moral compass. She'd been with Skyline for 7 years and had never seen a captain directly confront a passenger over seating. That was cabin crew responsibility. Moreover, she knew no VIP request had come through her manifest. "Nicole," Collins barked, "I need you to prepare a seat in coach for this passenger." Nicole hesitated, her eyes darting between Collins and Jamal. "Captain, I'm not seeing any seat reassignment in the system." "It came directly to the cockpit," Collins insisted. In row 4, Air Marshal Tyrone Jordan observed the escalating situation with growing concern. Trained to handle actual security threats, he found nothing threatening in the teenager's behavior. The captain's conduct, however, was another matter. Jordan's hand hovered near his secure communication device, weighing whether to contact his supervisor. "Sir," Jamal addressed Collins directly, his voice steady. "I understand you believe there's been a priority override for this seat. Could we verify that information before proceeding? If there's legitimate documentation, I'll comply immediately." The reasonableness of this request made Collins' position increasingly untenable. Several passengers nodded in agreement. The cockpit received direct communication, Collins insisted, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features. "Captain Collins," came Nicole's voice, stronger now. "Dispatch is asking why we haven't pushed back. We're now 13 minutes behind schedule." Collins glared at Jamal. "This delay is on you." "I disagree," Franklin Adler interjected. "The young man has a valid ticket and boarding pass. He's not obligated to surrender his seat without proper documentation of the override. The delay is occurring because you've chosen to create this confrontation rather than follow standard protocols." Other passengers began to murmur in agreement. A woman in row 2 spoke up, "I fly this route every week, Captain. I've never seen a pilot handle seating issues personally." Collins' authority was visibly eroding with each passing moment. His radio crackled, and First Officer Chen's voice came through, "Captain, what's your status? Ground control is asking for our delay reason. Do you think Jamal should stand his ground or give up his seat to avoid further confrontation? Comment number 1 if you believe he's right to defend his rightful seat, or number 2 if you think he should move to keep the peace. Like and subscribe to see how this high-stakes standoff reaches its breaking point. What do you think is going through Captain Collins' mind right now as his authority is being challenged? Let's find out what happens next when the mother of all plot twists is about to unfold. While tension built inside Flight 2187, the digital world was erupting with activity. Melissa Turner's video had jumped from 30,000 to 2 million views in under 30 minutes. The hashtag Seat Justice was trending nationally, with hashtag Skyline Shame following close behind. Breaking, Black teen chess champion threatened with removal from first-class seat, read the banner across CNB News. A split screen showed aviation analyst James Hoffman and civil rights attorney Letitia Washington, no relation to Jamal, debating the legal implications. "What we're seeing here is unfortunately common," Letitia explained. "The assumption that a young black man doesn't belong in first class is textbook implicit bias. But we don't know if there was actually a VIP request," Hoffman countered. "That's irrelevant," Letitia replied. "Proper protocol would never involve the captain personally confronting a passenger this way. And notice how no documentation of this supposed request has been presented." The video had been clipped, shared, and analyzed across platforms. Body language experts pointed out Collins' aggressive posture. Aviation professionals critiqued his violation of standard procedures. Civil rights activists highlighted the incident as emblematic of everyday discrimination. In airport terminals across the country, travelers gathered around televisions displaying the unfolding story. At Hamilton International's Operations Center, Director Kenneth Blackwell was receiving frantic calls from Skyline executives. "The aircraft is still at the gate," he confirmed. "I've got ground staff standing by, but the captain hasn't requested assistance." "This is a PR nightmare," Skyline's VP of Operations Harold Bennett shouted through the phone. "Get that plane either in the air or completely deplaned before we have protesters showing up." At Skyline's headquarters, executives scrambled to formulate a response. The airline's social media accounts were being flooded with outraged comments and demands for action. "We're aware of the situation involving a passenger on Flight 2187 and are investigating the circumstances," their hastily crafted statement read. Skyline Airlines is committed to treating all passengers with dignity and respect. The response only fueled further criticism, with commenters pointing out the statement's failure to acknowledge the racial dimension of the incident. First Officer Chen, still in the cockpit, was frantically searching for any record of a VIP seat request. Finding nothing, she made a difficult decision and contacted the airline's operational headquarters directly, bypassing Captain Collins. "This is First Officer Chen on Flight 2187, she reported. "We have a situation that's escalating. Captain Collins is in a confrontation with a passenger over seat assignments, but I can't find any override request in our systems." Meanwhile, other Skyline pilots and crew members watched the viral video with mortification. Captain Darren Williams, a 20-year veteran, texted his union representative, "This is destroying everything we've worked for. Collins is making us all look like power-tripping racists." As the video spread, internet sleuths began digging into Captain Collins' background. Within an hour, they had uncovered a deleted Facebook post from 2020 where Collins had complained about diversity hires diluting the airline industry's standards. Screenshots were being shared alongside the current incident, creating a damning narrative. In the ZW Technologies boardroom, Zora Washington watched multiple screens tracking the situation's development. Her security team reported from Hamilton International, "We're in position, ma'am. Awaiting your instructions." The video had now reached international platforms. Comments flooded in from around the globe. "This is why my son fears flying to America. I've experienced this exact treatment on 3 separate flights. Notice how no other passengers stood up for him until the white lawyer did." What had begun as one passenger's video had transformed into a global conversation about race, authority, and belonging. Aviation experts questioned Collins' professionalism. Race scholars cited the incident in real-time Twitter discussions about public accommodations discrimination. Airline industry analysts predicted significant financial repercussions for Skyline. Inside the aircraft, Jamal remained composed, unaware that his quiet refusal to surrender his seat had ignited a worldwide reaction. His phone was in airplane mode, his attention focused on the immediate situation. He had no idea that his mother was watching every development, that his name was trending across platforms, or that his stand was becoming symbolic of a much larger struggle. Back at Skyline headquarters, CEO Philip Lancaster had just emerged from an emergency meeting with legal counsel. Their advice had been unambiguous: the airline needed to defuse the situation immediately, remove Collins from the flight, and issue a public apology to Jamal. "Get me direct contact with that aircraft," Lancaster demanded. "This ends now." But before his order could be implemented, Zora Washington made her decision. After watching passenger interviews being broadcast from the terminal, including one woman describing how she'd seen Collins deliberately single out Jamal despite other first-class seats being empty, Zora recognized that the moment required more than behind-the-scenes management. "Prepare my car," she instructed her driver. "We're going to the airport." As her vehicle pulled away from ZW Technologies Tower, Zora initiated the protocol she had hoped to avoid. With a few taps on her secure tablet, she activated Operation Transparency, the contingency plan for revealing her ownership of both Hamilton International and Skyline Airlines. The first phase would begin in exactly 15 minutes, with simultaneous press releases to all major news outlets. The second phase would commence upon her arrival at the aircraft. While digital chaos swirled around Flight 2187, the standoff inside the cabin was approaching its breaking point. Collins had retreated momentarily to consult with ground staff, leaving Jamal and the other passengers in uneasy limbo. What no one on that aircraft yet realized was that the most powerful player in this scenario hadn't even made her first move. Like her son, Zora Washington understood chess strategy, and she was about to execute a move that would transform the entire game. The sleek black Audi pulled directly onto the tarmac at Hamilton International Airport, a privilege reserved for the highest security clearances. Airport Director Kenneth Blackwell himself waited at the foot of the mobile staircase that had been positioned adjacent to Flight 2187's forward door. When Zora Washington emerged from the vehicle, her presence commanded immediate attention. She wore a precisely tailored charcoal suit, her locks pulled back in a professional style that had become her signature in business publications worldwide. Two security personnel flanked her, along with her chief counsel, Maya Patel. "Ms. Washington," Blackwell stammered, "we had no idea you were personally." "Status report," Zora interrupted, climbing the stairs with purposeful strides. "Captain Collins is still on board. The aircraft remains at the gate with doors open. Social media coverage has exploded in the past hour." Zora nodded once. "Have my press team arrived?" "Yes, ma'am. They're positioning in the main terminal as requested." Inside the aircraft, Collins had returned to the first-class cabin, now accompanied by two ground crew supervisors. His expression had shifted from angry to anxious as the reality of his situation began to dawn on him. "Young man," one supervisor addressed Jamal, careful to maintain a respectful tone amid the forest of recording phones, "we sincerely apologize for the confusion. There appears to have been a miscommunication about seating arrangements." "There was no miscommunication," Franklin Adler interjected from his seat. "The captain made assumptions based on nothing but his own prejudice." Collins' face flushed. "That's absolutely not." His protest died mid-sentence as the forward cabin door reopened. Every head turned as Zora Washington stepped into the aircraft. Recognition rippled through the cabin. Some passengers knew her from tech conferences, others from magazine covers, a few from her recent Time Person of the Year feature. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jamal broke the silence. "Mom." His composed demeanor cracked slightly with surprise. "What are you doing here?" Zora moved directly to her son, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "I saw what was happening." She turned to face Collins, her gaze unwavering. "Captain Collins, I believe you owe my son an apology." Collins blinked rapidly, confusion evident in his expression. "Ms. Washington, there was a VIP request for." "There was no request," Zora stated flatly. "I've personally reviewed all communications to and from this aircraft. You invented a situation to justify removing my son from a seat he legally purchased." The ground crew supervisors looked mortified. One whispered urgently into his radio. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Collins suggested, suddenly aware of how many passengers were still recording. No, Zora replied. Discrimination thrives in privacy. This will be addressed right here, where it happened. She addressed the entire cabin. For those unaware, my name is Zora Washington. 3 years ago, I acquired a controlling interest in Skyline Airlines through my investment firm. Gasps and murmurs filled the cabin. Collins' face drained of color. You own Skyline, he managed. Yes. And Hamilton International Airport as well. Zora's voice remained measured, but carried throughout the silent cabin. Which makes me particularly concerned about how passengers are treated on my property and in my aircraft. Collins seemed to physically shrink. Ms. Washington, if I had known. If you had known my son was the child of a billionaire, you would have treated him with respect. Zora interrupted. That's precisely the problem, Captain. Respect shouldn't depend on knowing someone's connections or bank account. She turned to address the other passengers. What happened here today is unacceptable, but not unique. My son experiences variations of this treatment regularly, as do countless other people of color. The difference today is that Captain Collins chose the wrong flight on the wrong airline to display his prejudice. Outside the aircraft, media vans had begun arriving, alerted by Zora's press team that a major announcement was imminent. Airport security established a perimeter as camera crews set up near the gate. Inside Skyline's headquarters, executives watched the live feed from the aircraft in stunned silence as the truth of their ownership was publicly revealed for the first time. Effective immediately, Zora continued, Captain Collins is suspended pending a full investigation. She nodded to the ground crew supervisors. Please escort him from this aircraft. You can't do this, Collins protested weakly. There are procedures, union regulations. All of which will be followed, Zora assured him. The investigation will be thorough and fair. But you will not be in command of this or any Skyline aircraft until it's complete. Another pilot, already en route to take command of the flight, appeared at the cabin door. First Officer Chen stood behind him, relief evident in her expression. As Collins was escorted past Jamal's seat, Zora stopped him. One moment, Captain. I believe you owe my son something. Collins looked at Jamal, his expression a complex mixture of humiliation and resentment. I apologize for the inconvenience, he muttered. Not for the inconvenience, Zora corrected. For the discrimination. For the assumption that he didn't belong in that seat because of how he looks. The cabin held its collective breath. I'm sorry, Collins finally said to Jamal, unable to maintain eye contact. My behavior was inappropriate and unprofessional. Jamal nodded once, his expression betraying little emotion. I accept your apology, Captain. I hope this becomes a learning opportunity. As Collins was led away, Zora addressed the remaining passengers. Skyline Airlines will be providing full refunds to everyone on this flight, along with vouchers for future travel. More importantly, we will be implementing new anti-bias training for all staff, with regular auditing to ensure compliance. She looked around the cabin. Discrimination doesn't end with one incident or one individual. It requires systemic change and accountability at every level. That work begins today. The cabin erupted in applause. Passengers who had been recording now stood to capture Zora's powerful presence. Within minutes, this second wave of videos began circulating online, transforming the narrative from outrage to justice. After ensuring a new flight crew was in place, Zora took the seat beside her son. For the first time since arriving, her professional veneer softened. You handled yourself beautifully, she told him quietly. I was just following your advice, Jamal replied. Stand your ground, know your rights, stay calm. I'm proud of you. She squeezed his hand. Though I wish you'd taken the private jet. They shared a brief smile as the replacement captain announced their imminent departure. Outside, in the main terminal, Zora's press team was distributing a comprehensive statement to gathered media. Today marks the beginning of a new era of transparency and accountability at Skyline Airlines and Hamilton International Airport. For too long, the transportation industry has allowed discriminatory practices to persist without consequence. As the previously anonymous owner of these entities, I am now publicly committing to making them models of equity and inclusion. The statement continued with specific policy changes, investment commitments, and accountability measures, a masterclass in turning crisis into transformation. Back in Seat 2A, Jamal returned to his chess analysis, the encounter with Collins already being processed and categorized in his strategic mind. Beside him, his mother began reviewing the preliminary reports from the incident, already thinking several moves ahead. 48 hours after the incident on Flight 2187, Skyline Airlines executive boardroom hummed with tense energy. The long mahogany table, normally arranged with careful attention to hierarchy, had been reset in a circle at Zora Washington's instruction. "Equality isn't just for our passengers," she had explained. "It begins with how we conduct ourselves." Now, as executives shifted uncomfortably in the unfamiliar arrangement, Zora entered precisely on time, followed by her son Jamal. Surprise registered on several faces. "Mr. Washington will be observing today," Zora announced, gesturing for Jamal to take a seat. As the catalyst for what will be the most significant transformation in this company's history, his perspective is valuable. Jamal nodded politely to the executives, maintaining the same composed demeanor he had shown during the confrontation. Several board members nodded back nervously. "The investigation into Captain Collins' conduct has been completed," Zora began without preamble. "The findings are unambiguous. He violated 6 separate company policies, fabricated a VIP request, and demonstrated clear discriminatory behavior." Chief Legal Officer Patricia Alvarez slid folders across the table. "The report details everything, including previous complaints against Captain Collins that were inadequately addressed. There's also a comprehensive review of our complaint resolution procedures, which failed at multiple points." "Captain Collins has been terminated, effective immediately," Zora stated. "His union has been provided with the complete evidence package and has declined to contest our decision." Several executives exhaled audibly, relieved that at least this part of the crisis had a straightforward resolution. However, Zora continued, "Terminating one employee doesn't address the systemic issues that allowed this situation to develop. Our internal audit revealed 27 similar complaints across our network in the past year alone. Most were dismissed with minimal investigation." Marketing VP Daniel Peters cleared his throat. "Ms. Washington, our passenger satisfaction metrics have actually been improving." "For some passengers," Zora interrupted. "When we disaggregate the data by race, gender, and apparent socioeconomic status, the disparities are stark." "Mr. Peters, I expected your department to have already performed this analysis." Peters' face flushed as he made a show of reviewing his notes. "This isn't about optics or crisis management," Zora continued. "This is about fundamental reform. I've prepared a comprehensive plan." Her chief of staff distributed thick binders to each executive. The cover read, "Equity in Flight, Skyline's Transformation Initiative." This plan includes mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, from baggage handlers to this boardroom. It establishes an independent oversight committee with real enforcement authority. It creates transparent reporting of demographic data on passenger complaints and resolutions. And it ties executive compensation directly to measurable improvements in these metrics. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Finally, COO Robert James spoke up. "Ms. Washington, while we all support the principle here, this plan would cost millions to implement." $27 million, to be precise, Zora confirmed. "Which is approximately 1/3 of what we spent on lobbying last year, and less than what this incident will cost us in lost revenue and legal settlements if we don't make meaningful changes." Across town, in a modest apartment, Captain Wade Collins sat stunned before his television. Every major network was covering Skyline's emergency board meeting, with commentators analyzing the unprecedented transparency of a corporation live streaming its own internal reckoning. Collins' phone had been ringing constantly, journalists seeking comment, former colleagues expressing either sympathy or condemnation, and most recently, his attorney informing him that he was filing a wrongful termination lawsuit against Skyline. "They can't just fire me for one mistake," Collins had insisted. "They didn't," his lawyer had explained patiently. "They fired you for violating multiple company policies, fabricating a VIP request, and creating a public relations disaster that's cost them millions." The racial component makes it even worse from a legal standpoint. Now, watching Zora Washington announce sweeping changes to the airline he'd called home for 27 years, Collins felt the full weight of his actions crash down upon him. His retirement fund was largely in Skyline stock, which had dropped 15% since the incident. His reputation in the aviation community was irreparably damaged. And the mortgage on his lake house suddenly seemed insurmountable. Back at Westwood Academy, Jamal returned to school 3 weeks after the incident to find the dynamic drastically altered. Teachers who had previously questioned his abilities now cited his composure during the confrontation as exemplary. Classmates who had maintained polite distance now approached with newfound respect or curiosity. "Did you know who your mom was the whole time?" asked Trevor, a lacrosse player who had rarely spoken to Jamal before. "She's my mother," Jamal replied simply. "I've always known who she is." His chess club had doubled in size, with several students specifically citing his strategic handling of Collins as inspiration. The school administration, suddenly aware of their most prominent parent, had fast-tracked diversity initiatives that had languished in committee for years. While Jamal navigated his transformed social landscape, Zora Washington prepared for her most public moment yet, a congressional hearing on discrimination in transportation. What had begun as one incident on one flight had catalyzed a national conversation about who belongs in which spaces and how prejudice manifests in supposedly neutral systems. "We've reviewed the data across all major carriers," Zora testified, her voice carrying through the packed chamber. "The pattern is consistent and troubling. Passengers of color are 3 times more likely to be questioned about their seating assignments, twice as likely to be subjected to random security screening, and significantly less likely to receive compensation for identical service failures." The hearing room fell silent as she continued. "The aviation industry talks extensively about safety, mechanical safety, operational safety, security protocols. But for millions of Americans, safety also means being free from humiliation, suspicion, and discrimination based on their appearance. That kind of safety has been systematically neglected." As cameras captured her testimony for the evening news, Collins watched from his attorney's office, where they were preparing for mediation with Skyline. "She's making an example of me," Collins complained. His attorney sighed. "Mr. Collins, with respect, you made an example of yourself. Ms. Washington is addressing an industry-wide problem that you unfortunately personified perfectly." At MIT, where Jamal had been accepted for early admission to follow in his mother's footsteps, the admissions committee received an unusual request. Jamal asked to defer his enrollment for 1 year to focus on a new initiative, the Equitable Access Project, a nonprofit dedicated to documenting and addressing discrimination in public accommodations. "My recent experience revealed how powerful documentation can be in driving change," his letter explained. "I want to help create tools that make such documentation accessible to everyone facing similar situations." The committee unanimously approved his deferral, with several members privately noting the maturity and purpose displayed by a 17-year-old who had turned a traumatic incident into a mission. While Jamal's visibility grew in positive ways, he also faced darker consequences. Hate mail arrived at their home. Online forums filled with racist comments about playing the race card and privileged minorities. Security concerns prompted Zora to upgrade their home protection systems and hire additional personnel. "This is the other side of standing up," Zora explained when Jamal expressed concern about the backlash. "When you challenge systems of power, they push back. The question is whether the progress justifies the resistance." Jamal considered this as he prepared for a meeting with his growing chess club, now rebranded as strategic thinking for social change. I think it does, he decided. The resistance shows we're making real impact. Zora smiled at her son's wisdom. Exactly. If they're fighting back this hard, we must be doing something right. 3 weeks after Flight 2187 became a cultural touchpoint, Jamal Washington returned to Westwood Academy to a school transformed. The administration had hastily implemented diversity training for faculty. The library had prominently displayed books by Black authors. Even the cafeteria had introduced cultural appreciation menu items with questionable authenticity but undeniable good intentions. It's weird, Jamal confided to his chess teammate Devin after their first practice back. Everyone's either treating me like I'm made of glass or like I'm some kind of celebrity. Devin, one of the few other Black students at Westwood, nodded knowingly. Welcome to being the racism guy. Now you're the unofficial spokesperson for the entire Black experience. True to Devin's prediction, Jamal found himself fielding inappropriate questions from well-meaning classmates. Would you have reacted differently if the pilot was Black? Do you think all white people are racist? Can I touch your hair? Ms. Harrington, who had once suggested Jamal take easier courses despite his perfect scores, now went to painful lengths to highlight his contributions in class. Jamal has such a unique perspective on Hamlet's dilemma, coming from his background, she'd announced, though Jamal's interpretation had nothing to do with his racial identity. Meanwhile, across town, Wade Collins sat across from his attorney in a sterile mediation room. Skyline Airlines' legal team had presented their final offer, a significantly reduced severance package in exchange for Collins dropping his wrongful termination lawsuit and signing a non-disclosure agreement. This is the best we're going to get, his attorney advised quietly. The documentation they've compiled is comprehensive. If this goes to court, you'll receive nothing and your reputation will be further damaged by public testimony. Collins stared at the document, his hand trembling slightly. 27 years of service, and this is how it ends. Mr. Collins, the attorney said carefully, I've reviewed the evidence. The VIP request you claim to have received never existed. That fabrication alone is grounds for termination. I thought I saw it, Collins insisted weakly. There was so much pressure that day. The attorney's expression remained professionally neutral, but his silence communicated volumes. After a moment, Collins signed the papers, effectively ending his aviation career. As he left the building, Collins passed a newsstand with Zora Washington on the cover of Business Week, the billionaire who built justice into aviation. The subheading read, How One Mother's Stand Against Discrimination is Transforming an Industry. At the congressional hearing on discrimination in transportation, Zora's testimony had catalyzed broader investigations. The Department of Transportation announced a comprehensive audit of passenger treatment across airlines, with particular attention to disparate experiences based on race. What happened to my son is not an isolated incident, Zora testified. It's a particularly visible example of what occurs daily across our transportation systems. The difference is that most victims don't have the resources or platform to seek accountability. Her words resonated with millions who had experienced similar treatment. #MyFlightStory trended for weeks as passengers shared their own encounters with discrimination. Airlines scrambled to announce new training initiatives and accountability measures, attempting to get ahead of the regulatory changes that seemed increasingly inevitable. Jamal, watching the hearing from home, felt a complex mixture of pride and discomfort. His mother was transforming an industry because of what had happened to him, yet he still struggled with being the face of a movement he hadn't chosen to start. I just wanted to fly home with my chess trophy, he told Dr. Patrice Johnson, the therapist his mother had insisted he see after the incident. And you should have been able to do just that, Dr. Johnson replied. The weight of this situation isn't yours to carry, Jamal. You didn't create the problem. You simply refused to accept it, which is your right. These sessions helped Jamal process the sudden public attention. His social media accounts had exploded with followers. News outlets requested interviews. Chess publications that had previously given his championship win modest coverage now wanted in-depth profiles. Jamal declined most requests, focusing instead on developing his equitable access project. He envisioned a mobile application that would help people document discriminatory incidents, connect with appropriate resources, and contribute to a database that could identify problematic patterns within companies. "I want to turn my experience into something useful," he explained to Devon and other students who had joined his initiative. "Chess taught me that individual moves matter, but it's the pattern recognition that wins games." His chess metaphors became a signature element of his increasingly confident public speaking. When a local news station finally convinced him to give an interview, Jamal explained, "Discrimination is like facing an opponent who's breaking the rules. You can either leave the game, which is sometimes the right choice for self-preservation, or you can call in the referee and demand fair play." While Jamal found his voice, Zora leveraged her newly public ownership of Skyline Airlines to implement sweeping changes. The company established an independent oversight board with significant representation from civil rights organizations. They implemented anonymous testing, sending passengers of different backgrounds through their system to identify disparities in treatment. They revised their hiring practices, compensation structures, and promotion criteria to eliminate biases. "We're not just changing policies," Zora announced at a press conference. "We're changing culture. And culture change is hard, uncomfortable work." Some shareholders balked at the costs. Others questioned whether such extensive reforms were necessary for what they characterized as one isolated incident. Zora's response was unwavering: "If you're more concerned about short-term profits than human dignity, you're invested in the wrong company." The reforms extended to Hamilton International Airport as well. Security protocols were audited for disparate impacts. Vendor contracts now included mandatory equity training. Customer service representatives received comprehensive education on recognizing and addressing implicit bias. These changes weren't without resistance. Conservative media outlets accused Zora of weaponizing her wealth to impose a woke agenda on transportation. Online trolls targeted both Washingtons with racist harassment. A small but vocal group of Skyline employees complained about reverse discrimination and political correctness gone mad. Yet the positive impacts were undeniable. Passenger complaints about discriminatory treatment decreased by 37% in the first quarter after implementation. Employee satisfaction scores improved across demographics. Skyline's initially plummeting stock gradually recovered as consumers, particularly travelers of color, actively chose the airline for its demonstrated commitment to equity. "We're proving that ethics and economics aren't opposed," Zora told her board. "Treating people with dignity isn't just right. It's good business." As the months passed, Jamal's focus shifted from the incident itself to the structural changes it had inspired. His Equitable Access project secured initial funding from several tech investors impressed by his vision and maturity. His chess team won the state championship, with local media dubbing them the Justice Squad, much to Jamal's embarrassment. When MIT reconfirmed his acceptance for the following year, Jamal felt ready for that next chapter. The incident on Flight 2187 had forced him to confront realities his mother had long tried to prepare him for, but it had also revealed his own capacity for calm under pressure, strategic thinking in real-world crises, and turning personal challenges into collective progress. In chess, he told Dr. Johnson during their final session, "The pieces that face the most opposition often become the most powerful." I think that's true in life too. 1 year after Flight 2187, Hamilton International Airport hummed with unusual energy. Terminal C, recently renovated with a stunning glass atrium, had been closed to regular traffic for the day. Instead, hundreds of invited guests filled the space, seated before a stage draped in dignified blue fabric. Above the stage hung a portrait veiled in silk, waiting for the moment of revelation. Airport staff in freshly designed uniforms guided attendees to their seats, their diversity noticeably increased since Zora Washington had publicly taken the helm. Jamal Washington, now 18 and preparing to begin his freshman year at MIT, adjusted his tie as he reviewed his speech cards one final time. The past year had transformed him in subtle but significant ways. His shoulders carried the same confidence he'd always possessed, but his eyes held a deeper understanding of the world and his place in it. "Nervous?" asked Zora, elegant in a tailored cobalt suit that complemented the terminal's design. "A little," Jamal admitted. "It's a big moment." "You've faced worse," she reminded him with a smile. "A speech is nothing compared to standing your ground against a discriminatory pilot." The incident that had thrust them into the spotlight now felt simultaneously distant and immediate, a watershed moment that had altered their trajectory while confirming what they had always known about the world's inequities. At precisely noon, the ceremony began. The airport director welcomed attendees, followed by the mayor, who spoke glowingly about Hamilton International's transformation into a national model for inclusive excellence in transportation. When Zora took the stage, the audience fell into respectful silence. 1 year ago, she began, an incident occurred that many might view as small in the grand scheme of aviation challenges. No mechanical failures. No security breaches. Just a young man being told he didn't belong in a seat he had rightfully purchased. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the diverse faces before her. But that small incident revealed something profound about our transportation systems, and about American society. It showed how quickly belonging can be questioned based on appearance. It demonstrated how authority can be misused when accountability is absent. And ultimately, it revealed how a moment of injustice, properly addressed, can catalyze lasting change. Zora detailed the transformations implemented across Skyline Airlines and Hamilton International over the past year, the industry-leading anti-discrimination policies, the anonymous testing program that continuously monitored for bias, the scholarship program for underrepresented groups in aviation, and the independent oversight board that had become a model for other transportation companies. "Today, we take another step forward," she announced. "It is my honor to dedicate Terminal C of Hamilton International Airport to a man who faced discrimination in aviation his entire life, yet never stopped believing that the skies should be open to everyone." She gestured toward the veiled portrait. "My grandfather, Lieutenant Colonel Harold Washington, flew 96 combat missions with the Tuskegee Airmen during World War II. When he returned home, commercial airlines refused to hire black pilots, and he was often denied service as a passenger on the very types of aircraft he had flown in combat." With a nod from Zora, Jamal joined her at the podium. Together, they pulled the cord that released the silk covering, revealing a dignified portrait of Harold Washington in his military uniform. The Harold Washington Terminal will stand as a reminder that progress isn't inevitable, it requires standing firm in the face of injustice and working systematically to create the world we wish to see. The audience rose in standing ovation as Jamal stepped forward to deliver his address. "I never met my great-grandfather," he began. "But his spirit shaped my life through the lessons he taught my mother, which she passed on to me. The most important, never apologize for occupying space you have earned." Jamal spoke with the measured confidence that had served him well during the confrontation a year earlier, but now informed by months of reflection and purpose. "When I refused to give up my seat that day, I wasn't trying to start a movement. I was simply asserting my right to be treated with dignity. What happened afterward showed the power of standing firm, not just for yourself, but for everyone who might face similar treatment." He described the foundation he had established, now helping hundreds of young people of color pursue careers in STEM fields. He spoke about the Equitable Access Project, which had launched its beta application with 10,000 users documenting and addressing discrimination across various industries. "A chess player learns to think several moves ahead," Jamal explained. "The incident on Flight 2187 taught me to apply that same strategic thinking to social change. Each documented incident, each policy reform, each mind changed, these are all moves in a larger game of transforming systems that were built without everyone in mind." Across town, in a modest apartment where he had downsized after his termination, Wade Collins watched the ceremony on television. The past year had humbled him significantly. After his dismissal from Skyline, no other airline would touch him. His lawsuit settlement had barely covered his legal fees. His reputation in the aviation community was irreparably damaged. Yet the former pilot had undergone his own transformation, albeit a painful one. Initially bitter and defensive, Collins had eventually been forced to confront his own biases through mandated counseling that was part of his settlement agreement. The hardest part, he had told his therapist, was admitting that I would never have questioned a white teenager in that seat. I didn't think of myself as racist, but when I look at my actions objectively. Collins had recently accepted a position teaching aviation theory at a community college, a significant step down from his captain's role, but an opportunity to shape new pilots with the hard lessons he'd learned. His syllabus now included a unit on ethical decision-making and bias awareness, using his own experience as a cautionary tale. Back at the ceremony, Jamal concluded his speech with a reflection that moved many to tears. My great-grandfather wasn't alive to see a black man become president, or a black woman become vice president. He didn't live to see his granddaughter become a billionaire, or his great-grandson stand his ground on Flight 2187. But every time we refuse to be displaced, from an airplane seat, from a voting booth, from any space we have the right to occupy, we honor his legacy and move this country closer to its promises. As the ceremony transitioned to a reception, guests mingled in the terminal that would serve millions of travelers in the coming years, each passing under the watchful gaze of Harold Washington's portrait. Jamal found himself approached by a young black girl, perhaps 10 years old, clutching a chess piece, a queen. "Are you the boy from the airplane?" she asked, her eyes wide with recognition. "I am," Jamal confirmed with a smile. "My dad says you changed things," she continued. "He says now when we fly, people have to be nicer." Jamal knelt to meet her at eye level. "Your dad is right. And someday, you might change things too." The girl nodded solemnly, gripping her chess piece tighter. "I'm learning to play. My teacher says the queen is the most powerful piece." "That's true," Jamal agreed. "But do you know why she's so powerful?" The girl shook her head. "Because she can move in any direction. Forward, backward, side to side, diagonally. The queen doesn't let anything limit her movement." Later that afternoon, Jamal boarded a Skyline flight to Boston to attend MIT orientation. As he settled into his first-class seat, purchased with his own foundation stipend this time, he noted the subtle but significant differences in the crew's behavior. The flight attendant didn't double-check his boarding pass. The passengers beside him didn't seem surprised by his presence. The captain, passing through the cabin during boarding, nodded respectfully. Small changes, perhaps. But meaningful ones. As the aircraft taxied past the newly dedicated Harold Washington terminal, Jamal glimpsed his great-grandfather's portrait through the windows. He thought about the continuum of progress, how each generation faced its own version of the same struggle, each making incremental advances that accumulated over time. His mother had texted him just before boarding, "Proud of you. Remember what Grandpa Harold always said, the sky belongs to everyone who has the courage to claim it." Jamal Washington looked out at the endless blue expanse as the aircraft took flight. One seat. One flight. One moment of refusing to be displaced. And now, one more step toward the world as it should be. What would you have done in Jamal's situation? Comment below with your thoughts on standing your ground versus avoiding conflict. Like and subscribe if you believe in fighting for what's right, even when it's difficult. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that small acts of courage can create massive change. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a powerful story of discrimination, resilience, and transformation. Until next time, remember that your voice matters and your presence deserves respect, no matter where you sit. This story teaches us several powerful lessons about confronting racism in America. First, dignity is non-negotiable. Jamal's calm refusal to surrender his rightfully purchased seat demonstrates that standing your ground against discrimination is both necessary and effective. Second, documentation is crucial. the passengers who recorded the incident created undeniable evidence that transformed a personal injustice into systemic change. The story also reveals how privilege operates in complex ways. While Zora's wealth ultimately provided leverage for accountability, true justice shouldn't require exceptional resources. Most victims of discrimination don't have billionaire mothers, which is why creating accessible tools and policies to protect everyone is essential. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative shows that confronting racism requires both individual courage and institutional reform. Jamal's personal stand was meaningful, but lasting change came through his mother's systematic overhaul of company policies, training programs, and accountability measures. Real progress happens when personal dignity connects with structural transformation. Finally, the story reminds us that each generation builds upon previous struggles. Harold Washington couldn't experience the changes his family later created, but his legacy lived through their continued fight for justice and belonging. What would you have done in Jamal's position? Would you have stood your ground like he did, or moved seats to avoid conflict? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in standing up against discrimination, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more powerful stories of courage and justice. Has anyone ever questioned your right to be somewhere based on how you look? Let us know your experiences. Thank you for joining this important conversation about dignity, belonging, and creating positive change. Remember, sometimes the most powerful move is simply refusing to be moved. Share this story with someone who needs inspiration to stand their ground today.